The last person I expected to smile at my mother's funeral was my sister's husband. Yet as we followed the hearse to the attorney's office, he looked more excited than heartbroken. The moment everyone sat down, he didn't even wait for the lawyer to open the will. He stood, straightened his jacket, and confidently announced, "The reading isn't necessary. My wife will receive the entire $4.2 million estate." Several relatives nodded like it was already decided. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because sitting on the attorney's desk was a sealed envelope my mother had signed 30 years earlier. And the moment he opened it, my brother-in-law's entire future collapsed before anyone even heard the will. My name is Natalie Brooks, and I'm 31 years old. Until the afternoon of my mother's funeral, I believed grief was the heaviest feeling a person could carry. I had no idea betrayal could weigh even more. We buried my mother on a cold October morning beneath gray skies that seemed determined to mirror everyone's mood. Friends offered quiet condolences before drifting away, leaving only family behind. That was when the atmosphere changed. The tears disappeared. Conversations became whispers. Every glance seemed to carry an unspoken question about what would happen next. My older sister, Claire, stood beside her husband, Daniel. He wore the kind of confident smile that didn't belong at a funeral. Even while accepting sympathy from relatives, his eyes kept wandering toward the attorney waiting near his car with a leather briefcase. Daniel had always loved talking about money. Every holiday somehow became a discussion about investments, real estate, or inheritance. Mom used to laugh it off, but I often noticed the disappointment hiding behind her smile. Growing up, everyone assumed Claire would eventually receive the largest share of everything simply because people believed she was the eldest child. Daniel repeated that belief, so often it sounded like absolute fact. I never argued with him. There wasn't any point. My mother had trusted me with something years earlier, and she made me promise never to discuss it while she was alive. An hour after the funeral, our family gathered inside Attorney Michael Reynolds' office. The room was silent except for the ticking grandfather clock against the wall. Mr. Reynolds hadn't even opened Mom's file when Daniel suddenly stood. "We can save everyone some time," he announced confidently. "The investments and the entire $4.2 million estate belong to my wife. She's the eldest child." The room froze. I slowly turned toward Mr. Reynolds. He looked back at me. For one impossible moment, neither of us spoke. Then, we both started laughing. The laughter lasted only a second, but it was enough to wipe the confidence from Daniel's face. "What exactly is so funny?" he snapped, glaring first at me, then at Mr. Reynolds. The attorney calmly folded his hands. "Please, everyone remain seated. This meeting will proceed exactly as your mother instructed." Daniel scoffed and dropped back into his chair. Claire reached for his arm, but he pulled away, clearly irritated. I stayed silent. 23 years earlier, my mother had taken me to this very office. I was only 8, too young to understand why she looked so serious. She handed Mr. Reynolds a thick sealed envelope, then knelt beside me. "Promise me something, Natalie," she'd whispered. "No matter what happens after I'm gone, never tell anyone about this envelope. Let Michael do his job." I had kept that promise ever since. Mr. Reynolds reached into his briefcase and carefully placed a large cream-colored envelope on the conference table. Across the front, in my mother's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "Open only after my death." Every conversation in the room stopped. Daniel leaned forward with an impatient smile. "Whatever's inside doesn't change the obvious. Claire is the oldest child. That's all the law cares about." Mr. Reynolds slowly adjusted his glasses. "Actually," he replied, "the law cares about facts, not assumptions." Claire frowned. "What assumptions?" "The inheritance does not depend on who everyone believed was born first. It depends on one legal fact your mother carefully documented decades ago." My pulse quickened. Suddenly, little moments from childhood came rushing back. Strange conversations that stopped whenever I entered a room. Family photographs that disappeared without explanation. My mother refusing to answer simple questions about our early years. At the time, none of it had made sense. Now, every memory felt connected. Mr. Reynolds broke the seal on the envelope. Every eye in the room followed his hands as he slowly pulled out the first document. Mr. Reynolds laid the first document on the polished conference table without saying a word. No one moved. Even Daniel stopped pretending to smile. It was a certified birth certificate. Claire leaned forward immediately. "There," Daniel said confidently. "That settles it." "It settles something," Mr. Reynolds replied. "Just not what you think." He placed a second document beside the first, then a third. My sister's confident expression slowly faded as the attorney carefully arranged every page in chronological order. "I'll explain this as simply as possible," he said. 30 years ago, your mother completed a private legal adoption. Every document was properly filed with the county and later confirmed by the court." Daniel blinked. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Reynolds slid another certified record across the table. "Claire, you were legally adopted by Margaret Brooks when you were 4 years old after the death of a close family member. Your mother chose never to tell anyone outside a very small circle because she believed family is built by love, not biology." Claire stared at the papers as if they belonged to someone else. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible." "I wish it were," Mr. Reynolds answered gently. "But these are certified court records." Daniel shot to his feet. "Those documents are fake. She's lying. My wife has always been the oldest child." "The records aren't discussing age," Mr. Reynolds replied evenly. "They're establishing legal identity." The room fell completely silent. He opened one final folder containing notarized affidavits, hospital records, and the judge's original adoption order, each bearing official seals that left no room for argument. My aunt quietly covered her mouth. My uncle lowered his eyes. Claire's hands trembled as tears rolled down her cheeks. For the first time since we'd entered the office, I realized my mother had never hidden this truth to deceive anyone. She had protected it because she loved Claire as completely as she loved me. Then Mr. Reynolds looked directly at Daniel. "And none of these documents," he said calmly, "have anything to do with who inherits this estate." Daniel slammed both hands onto the conference table. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You're twisting old paperwork to steal what belongs to my wife." Mr. Reynolds didn't flinch. "No one is stealing anything," he replied. "I'm simply following your mother's legally binding instructions." Daniel ignored him and pointed toward me. "She's manipulated this whole thing." I knew something was wrong the second you two started laughing. "I haven't said a single word," I answered quietly. "Exactly," he snapped. "You've been planning this." Claire looked from him to the attorney, completely overwhelmed. "Daniel, please." But he wasn't listening anymore. He pulled out his phone and waved it in the air. "It doesn't matter what these papers say. The investment company already knows Claire is getting everything." Mr. Reynolds slowly raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry," he said. "What did you just say?" Daniel realized too late that everyone in the room was staring at him. He hesitated. The attorney leaned forward. "Did you contact the investment managers before probate proceedings began?" Daniel folded his arms. "Of course I did. Someone had to prepare them for the ownership transfer. You represented yourself as acting on behalf of the estate? So what if I did?" he replied. "It was only paperwork." Mr. Reynolds calmly opened another folder. "Actually, it wasn't." The room became painfully quiet. "Your mother appointed me as the sole executor of her estate. Until probate is completed, no beneficiary has authority to access assets, request transfers, or represent the estate in any financial matter." Daniel's confidence finally cracked. I didn't touch any money." "You may not have," Mr. Reynolds replied, "but attempting to interfere with estate administration creates a very serious legal issue." Several relatives exchanged uneasy glances. Even my uncle, who had supported Daniel for years, slowly leaned back without saying a word. Claire covered her face with trembling hands. Mr. Reynolds picked up his office phone. "I believe," he said calmly, "it's time I informed the investment firm that someone has been falsely claiming authority over this estate." Daniel's face turned completely white. Mr. Reynolds waited until the room became completely silent before unfolding a handwritten letter. "I was instructed to read this exactly as your mother wrote it," he said softly. His voice changed as he began reading. "If you're hearing these words, I'm finally at peace. Please remember that this inheritance was never meant to measure who I loved more. I loved both of my daughters equally from the moment each of them entered my life. Claire lowered her head and quietly cried. I kept one secret because I feared people would use it to divide our family after I was gone. Love made us a family. Greed would destroy it if I wasn't careful. I felt tears forming in my own eyes. Natalie, thank you for keeping your promise all these years. You never once asked for money or special treatment. You simply respected my wishes. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. I swallowed hard. Claire, none of this is your fault. You were always my daughter in every way that truly mattered. But I hope one day you'll recognize the difference between people who love you and people who love what they believe you can give them. The room became unbearably quiet. Daniel stared at the floor without saying a word. For the first time since the funeral, Claire slowly turned toward him. The disappointment in her eyes said far more than anger ever could. Mr. Reynolds carefully folded the letter. Your mother left very specific instructions, he said. Every decision she made was intended to protect this family, not divide it. He reached for the final probate file. The estate, he continued, will now be distributed exactly as Margaret Brooks legally directed. Mr. Reynolds opened the final probate folder and adjusted his glasses. Margaret Brooks' wishes are legally valid and fully enforceable, he announced. After all outstanding taxes and expenses are paid, her $4.2 million estate will be distributed exactly as outlined in her will. He looked at me first. Natalie, your mother appointed you as executor because she believed you would honor her final wishes without allowing emotion or greed to interfere. I nodded quietly. Then he turned toward Claire. Claire, your mother created a separate trust in your name years ago. It provides financial security that cannot be controlled or redirected by anyone else. Claire looked stunned. My husband can't touch it? No, Mr. Reynolds answered firmly. Only you. Daniel finally understood what that meant. Every plan he'd built around my mother's money had disappeared in a single afternoon. He stood without saying a word and walked toward the door. Claire didn't follow him. Instead, she turned to me with tears filling her eyes. I'm sorry, Natalie, she whispered. I should have seen what was happening. I reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. We both lost Mom today, I said. Let's not lose each other, too. For the first time that day, she smiled through her tears. A month later, we honored our mother's final request by donating part of the estate to the children's hospice that had cared for her during her last weeks. Standing together at the dedication ceremony, I finally understood what Mom had been protecting all along. The inheritance was never her greatest gift. The chance to rebuild our family was. And that was worth far more than $4.2 million.